Level 1, Failed Center. This tier is where the NBA's biggest what-ifs live. Failed centers are often high draft picks who entered the league surrounded by hype, framed as the next great big man who would dominate the paint for a decade. They're the players who front offices stake their futures on, banking on height and potential more than proven skill. And in today's NBA, when a team swings and misses on a center that high in the draft, it sets the franchise back years. What defines this level is not simply struggling, it's failing to meet even the basic expectations of a starting caliber center. These players rarely last long, and even when they put together a good game or two, the flaws outweigh the promise. Sometimes it's a lack of work ethic, sometimes it's conditioning, sometimes it's an inability to adapt to the league's speed, but the outcome is always the same. Disappointment. These are the names that get remembered not for dominance, but for wasted potential. Eddie Curry is a perfect example. Drafted 4th overall by the Chicago Bulls in 2001 straight out of high school, he was expected to become the new anchor in the post. He had size, touch around the rim, and the offensive skill to score in bunches. But Curry never put it all together. Conditioning issues and defensive indifference plagued him from the start. His one standout season in New York, when he averaged nearly 20 points, couldn't outweigh years of inconsistency. Within a decade, he was out of the league, remembered not as a franchise cornerstone, but as one of the league's biggest missed opportunities. Level 2, flashes without staying power. This level is for the centers who, for a season or two, looked like they were destined for stardom but couldn't maintain it. These players gave fans a taste of dominance, whether it was a stretch of elite defense, a career best scoring year, or a playoff run where they looked unstoppable. But that success faded quickly, either because of injuries, changing roles, or the game evolving past their strengths. They aren't total busts like the failed tier. They reached heights that proved their talent was real, but their careers are defined more by peaks and valleys than sustained greatness. When people look back on them, the conversation usually starts with one magical year or moment rather than an entire body of work. That's what makes this tier frustrating. The promise was real, but the staying power wasn't. Tyson Chandler is a strong example. Drafted 2nd overall in 2001, Chandler entered the league with massive expectations as a franchise cornerstone for the Chicago Bulls. For years, he struggled to find consistency, bouncing between roles before finally hitting his stride much later in his career. In Dallas, he played the best basketball of his life, anchoring the defense during their 2011 championship run. A year later, he won Defensive Player of the Year with the New York Knicks and briefly looked like one of the league's most impactful centers. But that version of Chandler didn't last. Injuries slowed him, his offense was always limited, and within a few seasons, he returned to being a role player rather than a star. His career was long and respectable, but the flashes of greatness never stuck around long enough to define him. Level 3, Journeyman Center. This tier is for the centers who stick around the league not because they're superstars, but because they're useful enough to always find a role. Journeyman centers bounce from team to team, filling gaps as defensive anchors, rebounders, or big bodies who can eat minutes. They usually have one skill that keeps them employed, but never enough versatility to build a franchise around. Their resumes often include a few strong seasons or even an all-star nod, but their careers taper off into short stints with multiple teams. These players are respected for their professionalism and longevity, but fans rarely see them as cornerstones. Instead, they're remembered as specialists, valuable for a time but never irreplaceable. Roy Hibbert fits this description perfectly. For a brief window with the Indiana Pacers, he looked like the prototype of a modern rim protector. At 7 feet 2 inches, Hibbert anchored Indiana's defense during their deep playoff runs in the early 2000s, even making back-to-back all-star appearances. He became famous for the verticality rule, using his size to challenge shots without fouling, and was seen as the answer to slowing down stars like LeBron James. At his peak, he averaged double-digit points, nearly 10 rebounds, and over 2 blocks per game. But as the NBA shifted toward pace, space, and three-point shooting, Hibbert's limitations were exposed. He struggled to guard quicker players on the perimeter, and his offense never developed beyond basic post-ups. Within just a few years, he went from all-star to journeyman, bouncing between the Lakers, Hornets, and Nuggets before quietly exiting the league. Hibbert represents this level because his career was defined by a sharp peak followed by a long decline, proving how quickly the NBA can leave a one-dimensional center behind. Before we get to the next level, only cool people are subscribed to this channel, so hit that subscribe button. Level 4, reliable center, but not yet elite. This tier is for the big men who bring consistency and leadership, but never cross into the highest levels of dominance. Reliable centers are the ones you can count on for steady production year after year, double-digit points, strong rebounding, defensive versatility, and professionalism on and off the court. They may not dominate the highlight reels, and they may not rack up MVP awards, but they are the backbone of good teams. Coaches trust them because they always know what they're getting, and teammates rely on them to set the tone. They're respected league-wide, often making all-star teams, and their careers last because of their adaptability. But what keeps them from being elite is the lack of an extended peak where they were undeniably the best at their position. Al Horford is the prototype here. Drafted by the Atlanta Hawks in 2007, Horford quickly established himself as one of the most dependable centers in the league. He became the anchor of the Hawks' rise in the late 2000s and early 2010s. Known for his defense, smart passing, and ability to stretch the floor with a mid-range jumper. Later, with the Boston Celtics, Horford elevated his reputation even further, becoming a veteran leader on young rosters and a key piece in multiple deep playoff runs. He's made 5 All-Star teams and has been the kind of player who adapts to whatever role is needed, sometimes scoring, sometimes facilitating, always defending. But Horford never dominated statistically or physically in the way the elite centers did. He rarely averaged over 18 points per game and was never the centerpiece of an offense. Instead, his greatness comes from consistency. Year after year, he's been reliable, respected, and valuable, but never considered among the best 2 or 3 centers in the world at his peak. That balance between consistency and limitation makes Horford the perfect face for this level. Level 5, elite center. This tier belongs to the players who aren't just reliable, they're dominant. Elite centers change the way opposing teams prepare. They put up MVP caliber numbers, carry franchises, and force defenses to warp around their skill sets. These players make multiple All-NBA teams, dominate highlight reels, and define their era at the position. What keeps them out of the all-time great tier is usually one of 2 things. Either their careers are still being written, or they lack the decades of dominance and championships that place someone in the very top tier. Still, when they're on the floor, these are the guys who make you feel like your team has a chance to win every single night. Nikola Jokic is the clear face of this level right now. Drafted in the 2nd round in 2014, Jokic entered the league without hype and has since redefined what it means to be a center. At 7 feet tall, he plays the game like a point guard trapped in a big man's body. His vision and passing are unparalleled. He regularly leads his team in assists, threading passes through defenses that few guards could even attempt. On top of that, his scoring touch is elite. He can back down defenders in the post, hit soft floaters, or step out and knock down threes. Jokic has already won 2 MVPs, a Finals MVP, and led the Denver Nuggets to their first championship in franchise history. But as great as he is, his story isn't finished yet. He doesn't have the longevity or sheer accumulation of dominance that the all-time greats do. At least, not yet. If he continues at his current pace, he may very well move into that next tier by the time his career is over. For now, Jokic stands as the perfect modern example of an elite center, a generational talent who's already left his mark, but still has more history to write. Level 6, all-time great. This tier is reserved for the giants of the game who completely dominated their eras and whose names will forever be etched in basketball history. All-time great centers don't just have peak seasons. They put together careers filled with all-star appearances, MVPs, deep playoff runs, and legacies that influenced how the game was played. They were the cornerstones of their franchises, and in many cases, the faces of the entire NBA during their prime. What separates them from the GOAT tier is that while their greatness is undeniable, they still stand just a notch below the handful of names who defined the position for all time. Still, when you talk about the history of basketball, these are the names you can't leave out. Shaquille O'Neal is perhaps the most obvious member of this level. At over 7 feet tall and over 300 pounds, Shaq was a force of nature. His sheer power overwhelmed opponents, making him nearly impossible to stop near the rim. From his early days in Orlando to his championship runs with the Lakers and Heat, Shaq collected 4 titles, a league MVP, and 3 finals MVPs. He was the most physically dominant center since Wilt Chamberlain, breaking backboards and striking fear into anyone tasked with guarding him. Yet, his free throw struggles and conditioning issues kept him from an even higher tier. Patrick Ewing also belongs here. As the face of the New York Knicks during the 1990s, Ewing embodied toughness, consistency, consistency and leadership. He was an 11-time All-Star, the centerpiece of a franchise that battled through the fiercest Eastern Conference rivalries of the era. Ewing's mid-range jumper and defensive presence made him one of the most complete big men of his generation. But despite his greatness, he never captured a championship. Held back by the dominance of Michael Jordan's Bulls and Hakeem Olajuwon's Rockets. Both Shaq and Ewing represent what this level is all about. Centers who stood among the best of their time, who were icons in the league, and who left behind legacies worthy of the all-time great label. Level 7, GOAT tier. This is the absolute summit of the mountain. The place where the conversation about the greatest centers of all time takes place. Unlike other levels, there isn't just one name here, because the debate is too rich, too layered, and too dependent on era. Each of the legends in this tier dominated in their own way, changing how the game was played and leaving behind legacies that still loom over basketball decades later. What defines the GOAT tier is not just numbers or titles, but the way these players transcended their position, redefining what it meant to be a center and carrying their franchises into immortality. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is often the first name mentioned. With 6 MVPs, 6 championships, and the most unstoppable move in basketball history, the skyhook, Kareem combined longevity with dominance better than anyone. He held the all-time scoring record for nearly 40 years, a testament to his consistency and excellence. Wilt Chamberlain represents raw statistical dominance. He once scored 100 points in a single game, averaged 50 points for an entire season, and still holds records that seem impossible to touch. Critics note that his era lacked the depth of competition seen later, but even with that caveat, Wilt's numbers remain jaw-dropping and his impact undeniable. Then there's Bill Russell, the ultimate winner. In 13 seasons, he captured 11 championships with the Boston Celtics, anchoring the greatest dynasty in league history. Russell redefined defense, rebounding, and leadership, proving that impact goes beyond the box score. The GOAT tier for centers doesn't have one clear answer. It's a debate. Kareem, Wilt, and Russell each bring different cases, and depending on what you value, dominance, skill, or winning, you might pick a different name. But together, they form the holy trinity of big men, standing alone as the greatest of the greatest. If you like this video, consider watching this next one, which YouTube thinks you're going to really love.